Hello and welcome back again. Today I have a very special treat for you. You'll see in the frame that I have set up a small altar space. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the witch's tools, how they're used, and what they represent. Now you'll see in this frame that I have a small altar space set up. I would encourage you to be creative. Actually, this altar that I have these tools set on is a piano bench that's covered in two beautiful pieces of fabric that I got from the fabric store. You can also use the edge of a bookcase, the inside of a bookcase, just be mindful if you're burning a candle, the edge of a shelf, a mantle, a shoebox. The variety and the list goes on in accord with how creative you yourself actually are. So don't think that you have to go out and buy something special. In fact, for a lot of my own work, what I use as an altar space are those wooden TV tables, and I cover them. It's just the right size, it's a square shape, it's foldable, so that means I can also put everything away afterwards and not necessarily have to have something out where I've done whatever the work is. Now, each of these tools on this altar space, I've aligned with the elemental energy that they correspond to. This is another layer that you can add to setting up your altar, but it's certainly not necessary. I have in the east my athame. I have in the south my wand. In the west, I have a chalice. And in the north, I have my pentagram. And in the center, I also have this beautiful brass cauldron that I found in a thrift store. And I can use that as double duty to burn my incense with charcoal if I want to. Or I can also use it to hold any of the herbs or anything else that I might be using for whatever my working is. And I always try to have some sort of a candle. In this case, so that the candle is not overwhelming what I'm showing you here, I just have a small tea light. So what are the tools of the witch's craft? Let's begin with the tool that aligns with the east. The athame or the athame. This is my personal athame. I actually have a few, but typically what you are looking for is a double-sided blade. You want to have a tool that in practical terms you could actually use to cut herbs. You could use the very tip of it to inscribe a sigil or whatever it is that you would be using it for on a candle. And you also want to have something that fits very neatly and comfortably in your hand, so that as you're using this particular tool, it feels as though it has some weight, but it's not weighing you down. Now, an alternative to the athame is also a sword. A sword is a little cumbersome to put on an altar, but you could certainly use a sword as well. The intention with the blade and it aligning with the energies of the east is that of air, mind, and intellect. In many cases, you will use an athame to cast a circle and to open the quarter gates. You don't need to. You can also alternate that with using a wand, which I'll speak to you about in a few moments. But the intention with a blade, and also having it be a real blade that has the double-edged side and the point, is that you are essentially cutting through the energy. As you are opening the gates to each of the elemental quarters and asking those energies to be present in your sacred space, you're cutting an opening through the fabric of the energy that separates us from the other worlds and pulling it open so that you can allow those energies to come through. Also using your athame as a tool to cast your circle means that you are drawing up the fires, you are drawing up the air, you are drawing up the aether, all of those things that comprise our world as well as the etheric worlds. And you're calling it into energy through the point of your blade. The other piece to this is that as you yourself are generating and raising energy, having a tool that sits in the palm of your hand, and I often put the top of my finger on it like this as I'm scribing, allows the energy to flow through my arm, down through and into the blade, and metal is much more resonant in receiving that energy, and then allowing it to drip out or be scribed out in whatever way you need. The athame is aligned with the energy and the gate and the quarter of east. As we go around a cardinal circle, we next come to the south. The south is a place of fire. In many cases, you will use a wand or a staff as an alternative in accessing the realm of fire. A wand can be made of many materials, but the wood is often a very good conductor of a different type of energy than what you're going to experience when you're holding your athame. This particular wand was made specifically for me, and as you can see, there is also a crystal point on the end, a quartz point on the end, which helps to mimic the energy of the point that's on the blade, so that as you are using this as a tool to direct energy, the same is true. Although with a wand, you wouldn't hold it quite so far down, so you want to get a wand that fits somewhere neatly, perhaps 3/4 of the way up. The length of the wand sits nicely in the palm of your hand again, and directing the energy through your arm, through your hand, down through that wand, and out whatever tip it may be. Now, some of the wands that are self-constructed are actually made from pieces of wood that you found perhaps walking in a wooded forest. They may be made from specific types of trees that hold the energies that are conducive to magical work. Ash wands, willow wands, rowan wands are very popular wands that are used, and they don't have to be as ornately structured. The thought with a wand is that it should fit approximately from the space of your middle finger up to about where your elbow bends. Anything that is much longer than that is usually a little unwieldy, and in my estimation, if you're going to get something longer than that, you might as well just get a staff, which would end up being slightly taller than the height that you have in your physical body. So you want to have something that encompasses and caresses from the middle finger all the way up to this point where your elbow bends. In this way, you're using the whole of the forearm, the energy that's gathered all in this place in your forearm, down through your palm and out, in order to send the energy moving and flowing in a very good and productive way. As we move around to the next quarter, we come to the west. The west is the place of water. The west is also the place where you will place your chalice. The chalice being the physical representation of the womb of the Great Mother herself. You can put your liquids in here that you may use for libation during or at the end of your ritual when you are offering up what is left of what you have eaten in sacred space and what you have drunk in sacred space to the earth or to the gods and deities. You may use it to hold waters that you then, during the course of your ritual, may charge with your own energy. And I have often done rituals where we have used everyone's chalice. They bring their own individual chalice. We pour spring water into the chalice and then call up the energies within ourselves of what it is that we wish to empower within ourselves. As we're holding the chalice with the liquid, our hand is cupping gently over top. We are envisioning that energy moving from the central point of our being, filling this liquid that is contained therein, filling it exactly with the appropriate energy that we desire. We may tone a few ohms, or we may do a chant or a witch's rune, and then drink and consume the liquid as a way of drawing those energies into our physical state of being. With any magic that you do, like attracts like. And since our bodies are mostly made of water, or a good portion of the waters that flow through us also resonate with the fact that the earth herself is largely comprised of water. Whatever I do with liquids in this chalice is going to automatically seek out within my own being those waters that run through me. So there's quite a bit of magic that you can do simply using a chalice and some form of liquid that you can then ingest. Or another way to use this as well is to empower it the same way that I just explained to you, and then perhaps pour it over a piece of land if you're doing a ritual to empower the land or to heal the land. You can also pour it into your plants. Your plants will thrive and grow much more abundantly. So the uses for this are really only limited by your own creativity and imagination, and also by those things that within you perceive water to be. In the north, we have the symbol of earth. In this case, it is a wooden pentacle. It's also sometimes called a paten when it is in this form, because it's something you can set on your altar or you can hang on the wall. You see that it has within it a pentagram scribed. I particularly like this one because you can see the tree that is embedded in the wood itself. And to me, that is a representation of the as above, so below, and that I am also like the tree, drinking from the roots and the belly of the Great Mother, and extending and reaching that up into the heavens, and reaching up towards Father Son. Each of these points represents a wholeness of the universe itself and all of the elements that are contained within. The topmost point is spirit. The point to the left is air. The point to the right is water. The lowermost left-hand point is that of earth, and this is fire. So when you are also creating sacred space, traditionally, you are scribing, or would be scribing, a pentacle or a pentagram to ensure safety for the space, and also calling into that space all of the elements that you wish to be present. Now, this is something that you can set on your altar, and you can also use it to empower whatever it is that is part and parcel of your work. So I can place my chalice on it. I can use this to enliven the fires of each of those points. I can use it to hold my athame, putting the blade of it against whichever of these points I wish to activate and have that energy running through my blade out from that point itself. In this case, I had selected water. So with my blade placed against that point, I am, for all intents and purposes, sending the energy that would be coalesced and synthesized within my blade out towards the element of water. So there are many ways and uses that you can have for this particular item. And it also is very beautiful on your altar, in that if you want to put something else in that place of earth, just standing this up against something makes a really beautiful centerpiece. Now, I also want to clarify something. The pentagram and the pentacle. So what's the difference? It's actually really easy to remember. A pentagram is the basic geometric shape. It is the 5-pointed star. It is the representation of the 5 elements of earth, air, fire, water, and the topmost point being that of spirit. That is the geometric form and shape. A pentacle is that pentagram, that geometric 5-pointed star, that now is encased in a circle. And if you are doing scribings or you're doing castings of any sort, you may see people scribing the pentagram and then completing it with a circle from the point to point. Or you may just simply see them scribing the pentagram and that's it. Adding the circle, making it become a pentacle, then infuses another layer of dimension to the work that you are doing. You are starting with a geometric construct that represents the elements, the alchemical elements, and also the etheric realm of spirit. By adding that circle around it, the circle is representative of eternity. It is the place of endings and beginnings that continue in a continuum of cyclical fashion. These are the seasons. These are our lifetimes. We are born into this world, and then at some point we die and we leave this world only to be possibly reborn again. And so by putting that circle around those alchemical things and the etheric spirit that comprises all of the elements, by the way. So it's kind of, you could think of it this way, a pentagram is actually a redundancy because you have within each of these points, the 1, the 2, 3, and 4, each of the elements represented, and it's crowned by spirit. And spirit also contains all 4 of these elements in an encapsulated form. So it's kind of a double redundancy in that you have elements and then you have elements combined within spirit. But it's also a beautiful representation, again, of that thought, as above, so below, as within, so without, in a similar fashion. And the other thing that I have on here is the witch's cauldron. Now, I have a brass cauldron. You can certainly get one that is made of iron. You can also get small little cauldrons that you can actually use for cooking food and use that as part of your magic. The cauldron is a representation, a larger representation, and very similar to the chalice, in that with the cauldron, it's not just the womb of the Great Mother, but you could also think of it as being the great womb that is the Mother Creatrix, not just the Mother Goddess, but she who created everything. And you could think of this, the cauldron shape, and also in most cases, if you get a nice cauldron, the weight of it as representative of that wellspring of creation being drawn down into the manifest world. being drawn down into the space where I do a spell of low magic. I infuse it, I empower it with my alchemical self and everything that resonates with that. I draw it into my cauldron, I do my working in my cauldron, and that cauldron becomes the vessel that is a permanent womb that then will quicken and enliven. And because of the density and the weight and the astral inroads that have been created around the thought forms associated with the cauldron, I'm able to manifest what it is that I wish to have brought into the physical world. Now, another use for a cauldron and or a chalice that we'll talk about in another post when I talk about creating sacred space. You may have heard the term the Great Rite. Traditionally, the Great Rite, because it represents the symbolic union of the feminine and the athame or the wand represent the masculine or the phallic symbol, because it is a union in perfect trust of those two energies, there is a specific mini protocol called the Great Rite that is enacted in most ritual spaces, but not in all. Traditionally, the Great Rite was actually a sexual act of union, but that act was consensual. It was part of the magic. It was part of the energy that was used in combining the masculine and the feminine, and that point of orgasmic release where all of that energy is the most potent and the most viable form of energy. It was enacted by a priest and a priestess. Sometimes they were married, sometimes they were not. That really was not of any concern because the initial or the ultimate thought was that this was a consensual act of magic. And in the body of the ritual, no pun intended, when it came time to enact the Great Rite, they actually enacted the Great Rite or the Great Coupling. In modern tradition and in many, especially many of the coven workings, we use what is called the symbolic Great Rite, so that it does not involve two people actually having sex in a setting, whether it's a private or an open setting, that may create some discomfort for perhaps others who are attending or participating, or even discomfort for they themselves. So, to combine the energies in a symbolic way, the chalice has already been charged and tasked with the energy of representing the feminine principle, of representing the womb of life. The power and the potency of the energy that is sent through the athame is already that of the masculine. It already replicates the phallic symbol. And so the protocol is that as the chalice is to the woman and the athame is to the male, their union is in perfect love and perfect trust. So mote it be. This is often a protocol that will be done before you have cakes and ale as a way of blessing those cakes, which act as the physical manifest form of what that ritual's creation was to be. And the ale is representing the liquid that runs through that, the healing. It is actually also a combination, again, of the four elements, the cakes being that of earth and fire, and the ale being that of water and of air. So often this little protocol will be done prior to the passing around of the cakes and ale to the individuals, or even if you're doing your own little individual ritual. And when the blade is drawn out of whatever liquid is in that chalice, whatever ale is in that chalice, then that liquid is sprinkled on the cakes as a way of imbuing them with the divine, both principles being represented. So these are the basic tools of the craft. Now, there are others as well. The witch's broom, or the besom as it is called, is often used to purify space before you are getting ready to do whatever work you're going to do. You can actually just dedicate a traditional kitchen broom to that purpose. The intention is one of cleansing whatever it is and wherever it is that you are sweeping away the debris. We use a specifically constructed besom, which is the rounded, you can look this up online, it's the rounded with the long strands, kind of narrow conical shape with a thin pole coming out of it, not like your traditional kind of spatula shaped kitchen broom. We use the besom in preparation for our Samhain celebration. Because that celebration involves moving through both the world of the living and the world of the dead, we use the besom first and foremost to purify our working space. And we use it in both spaces that we're going to be using for the ritual. Someone is assigned the task of ritually brushing the debris, not because the floor needs cleaning, but brushing any energetic leftovers that may have accumulated from previous people inhabiting the building, because we rent space in a shared building and many people come in and out for various activities. So we go around the circle jessel, which is sunwise, or in the path of the sun, which means you're turning towards your right as you're making a circle. We sweep jessel around the circle's edge first, and then to complete the task, since we're working with the underworld and the upper world, we also sweep widdershins, which means that it's anti-clockwise. You're going towards the left in the opposite direction. By laying down this first layer of purification using our dedicated besom to do this, we are purifying the space and making it ready in an energetic way as well. There are incense burners, there are all manner of variety of tools that you can use in a Wiccan practice. But if you have nothing else, you will want to get yourself one each of these 4 tools to begin working with, because then you will be representing all of the alchemical pieces of yourself that then you'll learn to resonate with. Now, before we end, the other thing that I want to also share with you and bring to your attention, traditionally, it was thought, and in some covens and under some priestesses and priests, it is demanded that you make your own tools, or at the very least that the tools cannot be gifted to you, that you must acquire them in some way, and preferably, traditionally, you would make your own tool. Now, I don't know about you, but I certainly couldn't make a blade or even anything that would resemble that. So, my thought is that it's not so much about how you obtain your tool, which means that if you want to go on Amazon and you want to buy something, or you go on eBay and you want to buy something even that's used, even though that is another thing that is often frowned upon, you have power. You are a witch. You can consecrate, you can dedicate, and you can refashion that tool to be your very own thing, your own piece of magical equipment that even though you didn't make it from start to finish, the way in which you've transformed it and consecrated it definitely means that it's yours. So what I mean by that is that on the handle of my blade, and I'm not going to pull this too close for you, but on the handle of my blade, even though I purchased this blade commercially, I have inscribed 3 sigils that are representative of my own energy. When I received the blade, I took it out of its box. I felt it to see what energy it was already holding. I went through a process of cleansing and purifying it, and then in a formal ritual that I created, I dedicated my tool. Gifting someone with a tool is not a no-no. In fact, my husband, when the very first beginnings of my being on this path, my husband knew that I wanted an athame. And so for one of the holidays, he went online. In fact, I think he got it from Amazon. And he bought this, which is an all-utility knife that is very easy to get. He had an idea of what it should look like. This was my very first athame, and it was gifted from someone I love. And to make it especially personal, I added this crystal and dedicated it and used it for many, many years until I acquired another tool. So my suggestion to you would again be to be creative. I would be mindful of taking tools that were heavily used by someone else, especially if you don't know that individual. In fact, it would be much better to buy something new than to get something that you know was used heavily by someone. They're kind of discarding it and handing it down. Not that you can't do that, but there's still going to be a fair amount of their energy, their residual energy attached to that tool. And you're going to have to do that much more work to disengage it from that tool. The goal in having any of these tools is that the tool learns to recognize and to know you. It becomes an extension of your own energetic makeup. And so with that being said, treat your tools kindly, treat your tools with love, and treat your tools with respect. And when you're not using them, it's also not a bad idea to wrap them up, put them somewhere safe and away from anyone else handling them or using them, and treat them and honor them as you would any deity as you're walking this path. I hope you have a blessed day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.